The other day, Andy No tweeted about a man who was caught trying to ignite a gas line at a Portland hotel. He got caught. And a woman posted on Facebook that she had spoken to the police and they were concerned this guy would probably get cut loose in just a few days, even after doing something as insane as this. Now, I don't know what his intent was. Was he trying to blow up a hotel? I have no idea. I looked into this guy a little bit. I don't really find anything ideological. It just falls in line with crazy people doing crazy things. But the bigger issue is that Portland, I gotta say, is becoming lawless. And this is the result of an ideological district attorney. And worryingly, it may be the beginning of morality policing. If someone is sowing chaos and discord, seems like they're going to allow it. Unless, of course, that individual is a right-winger who's attacking them. So there's a couple other things I want to talk about. For one, I want to go through this and show you what they were saying about a guy. There's a photo of him. He was like wrapping a flaming blanket to a gas line. And then we have this post Andy No put up from the woman where she talks about what happened and how the Portland police said they're probably going to release this guy, just cut him loose. And he could do worse. He could do more things. But some big news as it relates to the protest is we have this story. Patriot Prayer leader Joey Gibson sues Multnomah County DA Mike Schmidt in federal court. Why? Well, Joey Gibson is facing felony riot charges. It's one charge, and they won't drop it. That's strange because according to Mike Schmidt, the DA, they actually were dropping a lot of riot charges for the left. So that's the argument that, well, I'll put it mildly. If you oppose their ideology, then they're going to lock you up. Now, here's my bigger concern, and we'll go through some of this stuff because we have some polls. Oregon voters say Portland protests now do more harm than good, and Portland is a very left-wing place, and they're turning on the mayor, and people not having it. We'll put it that way. But here's my bigger concern, and maybe a little hyperbolic, but listen. We know that the people of this ideology say revolution, nothing less. We know that they say we must dismantle capitalism and white supremacy. So, of course, Joey Gibson will face felony riot charges, and they won't drop that. They're going to say, no, we're going to use the power of the state to lock up, you right-wingers. They'll literally go and they hunted a guy down and killed him. But if it's an arsonist, if it destroys the system, the police worry this guy will actually get released. Now, I'm not saying he actually will get released. I don't know for sure. But here's the post we have from Facebook. And I want to show you this first because the bigger issue to me is the lawlessness that we're seeing creeping into places like Portland. It's no surprise then that Joey Gibson has to take it to the feds to try and get some relief in the courts because it seems like only Donald Trump, the DHS, and the federal attorneys are actually willing to enforce the law right now. These local jurisdictions have gone off the rails. Here's a post that Andy No put up from Susan Gadati. She says, "Today was a day I won't soon forget. This morning on my way to work, I saw firsthand some of the depravity that is infecting Portland and how our law enforcement has their hands tied in protecting our city. As I was driving around the back of a building to go park, I saw two men standing by the back corner of the building, looking around at me as I drove around the corner. And what I saw startled me so much that I didn't process what I was seeing at first. These two idiots were fumbling with a burning blanket they had wrapped around the natural gas valve that feeds the gas into the hotel and is located on the wall of the hotel. When they saw me put on the brakes and stop, they started walking quickly away from it. I finally got my camera app open and was able to snap a picture of the guy that I saw wrapping the blanket up around the valve before he took off. He kept looking at me, but he turned his face away from me just as I snapped it. Then I called 911. Which took what seemed like a long time to get through. But the fire department got there faster than it took to get through to the 911 operator. After the fire inspector, who was also a Portland police detective, came to the hotel, I was asked to give a statement of what I saw. While we were talking, he got the call that they had apprehended one of the suspects and would I be willing to go and see if I could identify if this is who I saw at the hotel. I agreed, and we drove about 5 blocks to where they had him. And I was able to positively identify him. And so did a couple of other people who had actually started following them when they realized what was going on. On the way back to my office, the inspector told me that it was his feeling this guy would be in jail for maybe 3 days and then would be cut loose again. How disheartening is that? If they had been successful, they could have caused a devastating explosion and possibly killed many people. Not only did they put that blanket around the valve, but they had placed several batteries that were taped together under the blanket to burn as well. I'm not sure what the reasoning for that was, but it couldn't have been good. I'm so sick of this behavior. Enough is enough. She goes on to say, I was asked to remove this post so as not to incite people to make people worry about their safety in Portland. I understand the concerns, but I also believe that everyone needs to know that they need to keep their eyes open and watch. And if they see something, say something. We can't afford to let this behavior ruin our city, our state, and our lives. And for those that believe this picture was Photoshop and I'm a bot, go away. I have no reason to lie about this and tell you and to tell you the truth is sacred. The truth is, it scared the crap out of me. I wish I'd have gotten better pictures of the man walking away and the other one running up to the street, but I was shook up from what I was seeing. Well, Andy No posted an image of the man. He posted this image of the guy walking away. We have this image of the blanket on the gas line, and then we have this arrest report for a Jet Thomas arson 1, unlawful use of weapon, menacing, and all these other issues. And I'll tell you what, putting batteries on this, depending on what kind of batteries they were, batteries go boom. I don't know if you've ever seen the phones exploding because the batteries swell up and they go bad. But there are certain batteries like lithium polymer batteries and to an extent lithium ion batteries. They can explode when superheated. When heated, I should say superheated, but when heated. And so maybe that was the issue. Maybe here, I'm thinking, I wonder if the idea was the fire itself wouldn't ignite the lines, but the batteries could create enough of an explosion to damage the lines, releasing the gas and causing a larger explosion. I don't know why the guy did it. I don't know I have no idea. No idea. I looked into the guy and I just seemed like a regular guy. It's just weird and it's creepy. But I'll tell you what, the reason I bring this story up is because of morality policing, something that I've been warning about for quite some time. Now, to be fair, I say that a lot right now, don't I? To be fair, we haven't seen a whole lot of riots or protests in Portland over the past several days, and this could be due to the wildfires. It could also be due, I think, because the feds came in and started arresting a ton of people, and they turned tail and ran. Because that happened a little while ago, and then things have slowly been simmering down. There was protests a couple days ago. It was a dance party, no agitators. Why? Well, the feds arrested all the agitators. Once the feds have them in custody, they can't be cut loose unless the feds cut them loose. But when it comes to the DA in Portland, they cut loose all the far leftists who then keep going out and rioting. That was the point of deputizing OSP. The state police were retreating from the city saying that we arrest these guys and they just release them right away. Could you imagine if they do that for this guy who was arrested on arson? Man, you got a firebug. He wants to blow stuff up. That's the kind of person you want to remand. I mean, I get it. Innocent until proven guilty, but it's a tough call. I think if someone's caught, there's photos, it was an argument for remand. But now Patriot Prayer leader Joey Gibson is suing Multnomah County DA Mike Schmidt in federal court. This is over selective prosecution. Patriot Prayer leader Joey Gibson and supporter Russell Schultz both face pending riot charges in Multnomah County. On Friday, filed a federal lawsuit against the county's district attorney, alleging selective prosecution based on political beliefs. The suit accuses District Attorney Mike Schmidt of engaging in unfair prosecution by refusing to dismiss a sole felony riot allegation against both Gibson and Schultz in light of his new office policy. Schmidt announced last month that his office wouldn't pursue riot charges against people involved in recent Portland protests without an accompanying allegation of specific property damage or use of force. Gibson and Schultz are among 6 men who were accused of inciting a riot on May Day 2019 between right-wing Patriot Prayer and left-leaning Antifa outside a Northeast Portland pub. 2 of the 6 pleaded guilty and were sentenced in January. Gibson and Schultz have pleaded not guilty, and their trials are set for October 26. Their lawyers, James Buchel, chair of Multnomah County's Republican Party, and D. Angus Lee, allege that Schmidt and his deputy district attorney are engaged in bad faith, selective, and retaliatory prosecution of Gibson and Schultz in violation of the office's own written policy. Gibson and Schultz want a federal judge to issue a temporary restraining order or preliminary injunction to halt their state prosecution. The 2 men's riot charges stem from a clash on May 1st outside of the Portland bar Cider Riot. Now, this was an Antifa bar, which was hosting a gathering of Antifa members celebrating demonstrations they held elsewhere in the city that day. Hostilities exploded after about 20 right-wing protesters, including Gibson, arrived outside Cider Riot near Northeast 8th Avenue and Couch Street and confronted Antifa members sitting on the patio. Several videos show people using pepper spray, throwing drinks, and fighting. Gibson disputes the single charge of felony riot. His lawyer said in court papers filed last year, A Portland police detective said Gibson could be seen in a video taunting and threatening members of Antifa and later physically pushing a woman before she was hit with a baton and knocked unconscious by someone else. Gibson's lawyers contend the allegations that Gibson pushed the woman are completely false and said he was trying to defuse a fight between between the woman and another man. Hours after Schmidt held a news conference at the Multnomah County Courthouse on August 11th to announce his new policy of charges stemming from the city's recent protests, one of Gibson's lawyers emailed a deputy district attorney inquiring if the new policy meant Gibson's riot charge would also be dismissed. Lee wrote to the deputy district attorney requesting that the riot charge against Gibson be dropped, arguing Gibson hadn't engaged in any other alleged assault or property damage. We therefore call upon your office to provide equal application of the MCDA policy and dismiss the charge against Mr. Gibson, just as you would for any other individual charged only with riot. Deputy District Attorney Brad Kalbaugh, after consulting with Schmidt, responded in an email to Gibson's lawyers, informing them the charges wouldn't be dismissed. My office's new policy pertaining to riot trials is not retroactive, Kalbaugh wrote. Gibson's lawyers pushed back, noting that nothing in the written policy that Schmidt's office released said anything about retroactivity. Yet it does say the policy will apply to all referred cases arising from the current protests. Now, hey, to be fair, the policy said current protests, but there's still an argument for selective enforcement in this regard that in the context, meaning that you have these people who have done nothing but riot. If they're going to hold one group to a particular standard, then it should apply to others regardless. Otherwise, they're going to arrest right-wing groups, but then when the left-wing groups get arrested, they release them. That's what you can't have. So they'll try and make the argument saying, no, it says current protests. Well, why wasn't there a policy from the DA's office pertaining to riots previously? Why is it that only when it's left-wing violence, now you have this policy? To be fair, I think Mike Schmidt was recently elected. I don't know when he was appointed, but still, it's not on the individual. It's going to be on the office, and there's got to be equality under the law. They say, so here's a quote. So just so I understand, Lee wrote back by email, it does apply to cases from the protests that began around the end of May 2020 through current, but it does not apply back further to Mr. Gibson's case. That's my understanding, Kalbaugh responded later, according to a thread of emails obtained by the Oregonian. The lawsuit filed by Gibson and Schultz also references an interview Schmidt did on video with his former Vassar College classmate, a social justice activist and hip-hop artist who goes by the name Awkward, before Schmidt started as district attorney on August 1st. So yes, he's a new DA. He'll argue that was a different policy from a different DA. The suit points to Schmidt's interview as an indication that he has a predisposition against Gibson and his followers. Schmidt, through his office spokesman, Brett Weisberg, has declined comment on Gibson's case, noting it's a matter pending before the court. Weisberg also Friday declined comment on the federal lawsuit. I'm wondering if they're going to bring this up in the actual trial come October and say, we have a motion for, to dismiss to the judge because they're dismissing riot charges for other people. Even if he's new to the office, his policy should apply. Well, I'll tell you, the people of Oregon probably agree. Oregon voters say Portland protests now do more harm than good, new poll says. And how about this? Oregon voters disapprove of Portland protests, feel police aren't using enough force, poll finds. The most interesting aspect of this poll is that Oregon voters believe the protests do more harm than good. You know why this is significant? I think it's going to play up to Donald Trump come November. Now, just a couple months away from the election, think about this. Oregon voters, it's Oregon voters, so it's not necessarily all the far left. There are conservatives in Oregon. But I think about this just in terms of a general, okay, maybe it's not fair to say Oregon is representative of the country. But you got conservative areas, you got liberal areas, and now everybody is saying, nah, not good. We don't like what they're doing. It's causing more harm. Do you think regular Americans in other parts of the country feel similarly? Because I do. And I think we're watching, Portland specifically, and Oregon voters talking about what's happening in their state. What do you think people in this country are talking about when it comes to what's happening in their country? Just the other night, there were still riots. Okay, so I can tell you that Portland, for the most part, has been chill. The OSP has gone in and kind of wrapped things up. But we did see protests. Rochester is still heating up. There's still riots in other parts of the country. And, just general violence and vandalism. And it could be a couple things why the protests stopped. Like I mentioned, it could be the fires. It could be Donald Trump solved the problem. I think that's a strong, I believe that's the strongest that's the most likelihood circumstance as to why the protests and the riots have sort of died down. But a lot of these people are probably heading to D.C. We're now only about 5 days away from the White House siege, so we'll see how that stuff starts to play out. But I do want to show you something I find truly fascinating here. I mentioned this in my main segment the other day. A majority of Oregon voters disapprove of how all major elected leaders have responded to the ongoing protests across the U.S. and Oregon. But take a look at Trump. 51% strongly disagree with what Trump did in response to the protests. What did he do? What did Trump do? He defended the courthouse. This is Trump derangement syndrome. So first, I'll say that should be alarming to people, man. I mean, it could be for the most part, this could be Portland right here, and this could be the rural areas. I don't know. But I'll tell you what, Trump did very little. Maybe that's what they're mad about. Maybe they wanted the Insurrection Act. I don't know. That could be the case considering Mayor Ted Wheeler has an almost equally high disapproval rating. So Trump's at 59 and Mayor Ted Wheeler's at 58% disapproval. Okay, maybe the people wanted Trump to crush it with an iron fist and they wanted Ted Wheeler to do the same. And I can back this up. Check it out. Mayor Ted Wheeler has a 30% approval in response to the riots and the protests, whereas Trump has a 39% approval. And what's the main difference between the two? Donald Trump sent in packed. So maybe the strong disapproval is people saying, why wouldn't he send in the military? I'm not entirely convinced that he could have and that it would have been a good idea. But considering that more people approve of Trump than they do Ted Wheeler, I gotta say, seems like the people of Portland wanted this protest to end when you look at the fact that the Oregon voters say the protests are doing more harm than good. And they're saying they want more force and they disapprove of the protests. I think they're mad at Trump for not doing more. I really do think so. Well, as I showed you, they hate Mayor Ted Wheeler. Under fire for how he handled protests, Portland mayor says he won't capitulate to critics. This is the best part. The middle ground is very elusive right now, Mayor Ted Wheeler said. When it comes to solutions, compromise is seen as a dirty word. The middle ground? You think you're the middle ground, dude. Standing down and letting violent far leftists do whatever they want is not the middle ground. The middle ground is arresting people and charging them. But of course, here is a man seemingly with no spine who had to run tail between his legs from his own building because people tried to burn it down and he couldn't get the police to do anything about it. Apparently people who lived there had called 911 one day and the cops didn't respond. Maybe they responded eventually, but initially they didn't. And they weren't going to come. Why go to Ted Wheeler's condo? He's the one who foments all of this. So he runs tail between his legs, scared. Now people are dragging him, saying he's done a terrible job. And he says, but I'm on the middle ground. No, you're not. You're doing nothing. Ineffectual, pathetic, and feckless. So I guess what? Recall the guy. There's a lot of people saying that they want him recalled. They want him fired. They want him to resign. Both conservatives and the far left are saying the mayor should resign. And you know what? I think so. Check it out. They say conservatives claim he has not done enough to protect the city from protesters who have gathered every night for more than 3 months, sometimes lighting fires and antagonizing police. Progressives say he hasn't done enough to protect residents from police officers who lob tear gas and other projectiles into the crowds. President Trump called Wheeler a fool for not reining in protesters, while Black Lives Matter advocates said Wheeler mishandled the unrest, which shows no signs of slowing down. I am embarrassed for him, protester Alashia Lauer said during a July demonstration. It's about time that Ted Wheeler realizes that people are demanding real change in the system. Zero change is causing nightly violence. Oh, he's causing the violence. Well, I'll tell you what, kind of. But it really does come down to the DA, and that's why the lawsuit's so significant. But I love it. No one's making you go out and throw explosives, dude. No one's making you go out and try and tear down barriers, vandalize stuff, and beat people in the streets. I love how that's like the main go-to for the far left. They show up and they start beating people and they're going like, oh no, they're making me hit you. Why is Mayor Ted Wheeler making me beat you in the street? Why are they making me throw this firework? He's not. But he's not doing anything about it anyway. So I find it funny when he says it's the middle ground. The middle ground is doing nothing. Okay. The far left and the right are complaining you're doing nothing. There's no middle ground. They're both mad about it. Now, granted, they want you to do two different things, and the far left is insane. So Ted Wheeler recently announced they were banning the use of tear gas in Portland. Okay, fine, whatever. The riots seem to have died down because Trump really did solve the problem, in my opinion. Or, people are heading to D.C. I have no idea. But listen, this guy is one of the weakest and most pathetic politicians we probably have in this country. And that's saying a lot because people don't realize we got like I don't know, several thousand. I think it might be like 30,000 actually, because you have lower level, like state level, local level politicians. But this guy takes the cake. I don't care if you got a corrupt town councilman in a city of 1,000 people who's, stealing bucks, stealing money from the community fund to buy beer. Nah, it's this guy. He's the worst. He should resign. The only problem is that his like principal challenger, this woman who's running against him, is an avowed Antifa member, whatever. And so what comes next? I'll tell you what, man. The far left wants to defund the police. That's impractical. It's impossible. That's not the middle ground. The middle ground is literally supporting the police and arresting the criminals. That's it. And the problem is the conservatives who are talking about this are, for the most part, just to the right of the middle ground. I'll tell you what the middle ground, that's what the middle ground really looks like. You want to talk about extremes? You've got people on the far right saying go in with live ammo, shut it all down, control the streets, dominate them, crush this. And that's not what conservatives are asking for. That's not what liberals and moderates are asking for. And the far left is saying get rid of all cops. You want to talk about extremes? That's what would be the real extreme. So you're not playing to the middle ground. You're just ineffectual and you're terrible at your job. Now, it'll be interesting to see how the lawsuit with Joey Gibson plays out. And more importantly, I'm hoping they don't release this guy innocent until proven guilty, right? But seriously, Portland's got deep-seated issues, man. If this is what the police feel like is going to happen, you got morality problems. Well, you do got morality problems in the DA's office, but you got morale problems too. I don't know, man. Portland, maybe they'll figure it out, whatever. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel, and I will see you all then.